Today, there are 2 million descendants of French-Canadian immigrants living in New England. These are our stories. Welcome to the French-Canadian Legacy Podcast.
Venez tous jeunes filles et garçons, je vais vous raconter l'histoire de notre immigration ici au USA, de grands aventuriers, de pays étrangers.
This is the French-Canadian Legacy Podcast. I'm Mike Campbell, and joining me is
Melody Kylig.
We just wanted to give you a short introduction to our COVID-19 check-in part 2 episode. So today you'll hear the second part with Jesse checking in with past guests, future guests, and friends of the show. We just wanted to give a little check-in on how we're doing. My son Bryce, aka the assistant editor of the show, is staying home because school is on hold until at least May 4th. New Hampshire has been great with online learning. They're using Google Classroom. Granted, he's only in preschool, so it's not a lot. But the teacher sets up a bunch of activities to do each day, and he's been having a pretty good time. I'm very fortunate that my wife is able to work from home, so she set up a desk in the other room, and I do my best to keep Bryce from bothering her until she's done with the day, which is not as easy as you would think it is. Of course, with a now 5-year-old running around the house. So how's things for you, Melody?
Yeah, not much has changed for me. I still have work. They did send home everybody that could work from home, and me and a few other people, we can't work from home with what we do, so we've been going into the office. But there's been very, very little to do. So most of the day, we do kind of have some free time. So I've been trying to just do some writing projects that I've wanted to get to, just my own sort of projects.
So you've been deemed essential.
Yes, because I work in a mailroom.
There you go.
And no, I don't do a lot of mailroom work. I'm still technically in the mailroom, so we're all essential in there.
Do you have any greater feeling inside about being so essential?
No, I was pretty jealous at first that everyone else gets to quarantine and I don't get to, because I would do an amazing job quarantining. So I quarantine during the weekends. That's as much as I can do, honestly, is just stay in during the weekends. So I've gone grocery shopping Friday night, and there's still no toilet paper anywhere, no disinfectant wipes anywhere, no hand sanitizer anywhere. And I've been buying hand sanitizer for many, many years now, and only now it's all gone everywhere.
So again, I want to thank everyone that gave us a few minutes of their time this weekend to record these interviews.
So our next guest is a person well known to listeners of the podcast. He joined us back in episode 4. He was actually our guest on last week's episode. David Vermette is a researcher, writer, blogger, and he's the author of the immensely important and influential book, A Distinct Alien Race, The Untold Story of Franco-Americans, Industrialization, Immigration, and Religious Strife. David, thank you for joining us again, sir.
My pleasure.
Now, so where are you located, and what does life look like where you are?
Well, I am located in Annapolis, Maryland, the fine capital of the state of Maryland. And the governor has basically stopped short of shelter in place, but all restaurants and bars are closed. All non-essential businesses are closed. No gatherings of 10 people or more. So we can go out and do things. We're not stuck in our houses entirely, but pretty much downtown Annapolis is a ghost town.
Now, we've discussed before that you are a musician.
Yes.
How is that working now? I imagine we can't play a whole lot of gigs if you can't get more than 5 people in a room together.
That's right. Yeah, my gigs, my music gigs and my speaking gigs, where I'm going to do yet another book tour to support the Distinct Alien Race. And I had several venues lined up for late April. Those are dead now. They've been postponed, I should say. I think it's likely that maybe next year I'll get those gigs back. But yeah, music gigs, they're pretty much canceled or postponed. And just in these last couple of weeks that I realized how dependent I am on getting out and playing music with people, how much I miss that.
How do you spend your time? What's your day-to-day look like?
Well, thankfully, a lot of my work is writer, editor work. I mean, that's my job. I'm a writer and editor as well as a musician. So thankfully, I can work from home. I still have my existing clients. So my life hasn't changed all that much. I was a pioneer of the gig economy back in 1995. So it's been 25 years since I've had a real job. And so, it hasn't really changed my life all that much besides missing my musician friends, because I rehearse with 3 different bands on 3 different days a week. Plus I have gigs. So that's a lot of, it's a lot of getting out. And so basically music is my social life. So it's a slightly isolating, but overall my life hasn't changed as much as a lot of other people's.
Okay. And the super important question to me, what suggestion would you have to someone like myself who is now stuck in an apartment?
There's a couple of things. Find some meaty thing you can get into. Like you were planning on going to Quebec to learn French. Hit the French books, hit the Duolingo, hit the whatever. You've got that to teach you to learn French. That's something I'm working on too. I'd like to get my French, to improve my French. So, I've been working on listening to French language videos on YouTube. Is something I do a lot. Improve my comprehension. So something like that. Obviously, music is infinite. Even though I don't get to play with other people, the practicing that I do, there's no upper end. You can practice forever and ever, every day, and improve and improve and improve. So I've got, French language I'd like to improve on. I've got music I'd like to improve on. And obviously my writing, my research and writing goes on, at least through online sources. So my advice would be find something meaty that really absorbs your attention and work on it.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Appreciate it, sir.
My pleasure. It's always great to talk to the French Canadian Legacy Podcast.
Now, our guest is someone I am very fortunate to have met actually through this podcast. Now, Réjean Beaulieu is a name that will be very familiar to many of our listeners. He's a frequent contributor on social media and has written a number of incredibly interesting articles, frequently dealing with Franco-American topics and often concerning Western Canada, the Pacific Northwest of the United States. Réjean, welcome to the podcast.
Glad to be there.
Now, where are you living now?
I live in very close to downtown Vancouver. For those that know Vancouver, just off the Burrard Bridge. So it's an interesting place, I guess, as the rest of America right now.
Although the stories we heard is that your area got really hit particularly hard real early on by this. What does Vancouver and the surrounding area look like now?
Well, I guess the way I was hit, I'm actually just finishing my 14 days isolation. I came back, I was in Europe, just right north of where this thing was burning hard in northern Italy. I was in the Alps.
Oh, wow.
And I had to interrupt my trip, so I came back a week earlier, so it wasn't too bad. And I got into this isolation, and then I got to experience my city in a totally different way, kind of locked up in my place. And I guess I'm over 60, so I was not being advised that I get out more than I have to. And of course, I was trying to be a good citizen and not go out. And I pretty much did. I did very well. I do have a dog, so I walk my dog at times, but I didn't go inside anywhere else. And did not socialize. So my socializing, I guess, is being done more than ever through the internet. What else?
Of course. Now, you recently wrote a super interesting article that discussed a couple of pandemics in the Northwest U.S. region. Can you just give us a couple of those? I thought that was very cool.
Often we pity ourselves for things being so bad and all that stuff. And I can tell you that in the old days, it was really, really bad. 1780, 30% of the population, native population, got wiped out throughout the coastline. So the Spanish brought this thing. That was a big one. There was a cholera in the 1830s, early 30s, came back every couple summers. It came through malaria ports. They were doing some trading in the Pacific, salmon trading, and that wiped out 80 to 90% of the population. So as they say in French, they say quand on se compare, on se console. When you compare yourself, you console yourself, if my English is right here. So history sometimes it can be fascinating. Of course, there was the measles that wiped out a lot of people. And the one that kind of got me triggered on that was another British Columbia historian. He went on about, as many other commentators, went out by the Spanish flu 1917-18, and I thought he went very colonial and kind of forgot to mention the stuff that I find, the history that I've been very drawn by for the last year or so, which is this prior to the border history, where the Francos and mainly Métis were really shaping up this place long before Rhea and others. So that was a fascinating part of history. A lot of people are discovering that, and I'm glad that finally is uncovered.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. Now, maybe you can give us some thoughts. How are you passing the time, and what tips, advice would you give to someone like myself who is now stuck inside all the time as well?
This could be a very long answer. I'll try to be concise. I mean, right now we're stuck through, I guess, the internet. I mean, it's not a bad place. Imagine, 100, 200 years ago, if you'd been locked up in a boat, that would not have been a pretty sight. So we're spoiled. We have fingertip access to all kinds of stuff. As you may know, I'm kind of become a newbie 1 year now on Wikipedia. So my take on Wikipedia about a year ago was I noticed really, really large gap in the Pacific Northwest history as it was reported on Wikipedia. There's an article there. It was fairly well done, but I thought it was so well done that it really deserved to have these gaps filled. So I tactfully corrected these gaps. And as I start looking elsewhere, of course, there's all kinds of other gaps in the Pacific Northwest in other articles and so forth. I kind of broadened my span across border bigger time, and I perhaps that's what kind of brought me back east where I originally came from including you folks guys in New England there. And I was recently looking at the counterpart of the Pacific Northwest, and I came across this other article on Wikipedia on the Atlantic Northeast. So this is all web surfing, kind of shooting the breeze, looking around, and I saw this interesting article, and it had the map. The map was really, really bad. So I commented on that, but I thought it was also quite a large history section. It wasn't all that good, and I figured that there was another gaping hole that could be filled. And then I went back in the center of the border, their center of the continent, around the Lake of Superior Lake. Very similar articles, similar gaps, and so on. So if some of your listeners are interested in Wikipedia, at first it's quite intimidating. It's extremely intimidating. But if you start with something really small, kind of like prototype mock-up work. My background is engineering, by the way. You could actually get going really fast. So what it means is that you get yourself a login. How long does it take? 5 minutes. 5 minutes, you get yourself a login, and then you pick up an article. It doesn't have to be Franco stuff. It could be whatever you like. And let's say that you see something that kind of irritates you. It could be a typo for certain people. It could be, whatever. You may want to crack a joke. However, you're supposed to be responsible, certainly on your first touch of Wikipedia. And then you can do your fix, and then you can submit the fix, and the fix will actually show right there. So it's quite powerful. And so some people, I guess, can get addicted to that. And
that's awesome.
That's my disclaimer there. Of course, writing your first article is far more intimidating, but before you run, you have to walk first. So I encourage people to give it a try. It's a cool tool, and it's really often we complain that the history has been written by the bigger guys, and nowadays it's actually quite easy. You can publish yourself, you can blog, you can do Wikipedia, you can do Facebook, social media, you can do podcasts, and there's all kinds of ways to fill all these gaps, very large gaps. I'm glad you guys are filling your own.
Well, I appreciate that very, very much, and your work is absolutely awesome. I look forward to being able to get you for a full episode once all of this kind of blows over. So thank you very much, sir. I appreciate your time.
Take care, guys. Wash your hands.
Yeah, you got it. You too. Joining us now is our guest from episode 21 of the podcast. Sandra Goodwin is the host of the very popular and very influential podcast, Maple, Stars, and Stripes, your French-Canadian genealogy podcast. Sandra, thank you again for speaking with us.
Hi, Jesse. Good to be with you again.
Now, what does your life look like now?
It hasn't changed. I'm one of the fortunate ones.
That's excellent. So one thing that we do know is that you have an amazing trip planned. And how
I had an amazing trip planned.
Okay. So first of all, tell us about what that trip was going to be and what the new status is.
It's part of our Walk in the Footsteps of Your Ancestors trips that we did. We did one to Acadia in 2016 and then to Quebec in 2018. So this time we were going to go to places where our ancestors lived in Trois-Rivières and Montreal. But of course, COVID-19 has ruined that, as it's ruined so many things for so many people. So what I did was I got on Facebook with the crew. We have a private Facebook group, and I asked them, okay, what do you want to do now? We can't go next year because Fred Clark from And Away We Go Travel, who is our tour director, is booked next summer.
Oh, wow.
So we would have had to wait till the summer after. But they all decided instead they wanted to move ahead to what we were going to do after this trip, which was a Walk in the Footsteps of Your Ancestor trip to France.
Oh, wow.
So what I'm doing now is tracking down travel companies, looking for one who can kind of customize a trip for us to the places where our French-Canadian ancestors came from, like Rouen, Dieppe, La Rochelle, Poitou, all the places where the original, well, not all of them, but a majority of the original settlers came from. So that's what's on the agenda now.
Well, that sounds like an amazing trip. The only town of those you mentioned I've been to is Rouen, and that was probably my favorite place I saw in France. That place is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it looks like a beautiful place.
It's like you're back in time. It's like, it is great.
Oh, yeah.
It's a medieval town. It's really, really neat. So my question then is, do you have any suggestion for someone like myself who is now finding himself stuck inside the apartment for the foreseeable future?
Research. Here's a great time to find out who your ancestors are all the way back to France. Find out where they came from.
There you go. And if you need any tips to do that, start early on. Maple Stars and Stripes right from the beginning.
There you go.
Very, very cool. Well, I'm glad that you guys are still able to kind of make the adjustment. Obviously, big bummer that your trip up to Quebec can't happen, but I think that's awesome that you're still going forward with this trip to France. That should be a blast.
Well, we're hoping to, unless some other pandemic or some other disaster strikes, which hopefully it won't.
You're right. I think we've learned nothing's guaranteed at this point.
That's right. Have to be flexible.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate it very, very much, Sandra.
All right. Take care, Jesse.
All right. Joining us now is a future guest of the podcast, actually, a doctoral candidate at the University of Virginia and the host of the terrific podcast, the North American Francophone podcast, Claire Marie Brisson. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, what does your new reality look like now in Charlottesville?
Yeah, so I teach at the University of Virginia, and it's been such a transition. I've been tasked with helping the French department actually transition all of their classes online, and it's been difficult, especially for those who just don't feel comfortable with the online environment. It's been really weird, and it's also been strange seeing just, the city go from vibrant to empty.
Has the university already called classes for the remainder of the term, or are they just still in a wait-and-see, constant delay mode?
Yeah, so they actually canceled all of the classes for the rest of the term. They've canceled graduation. Everything's online. I was supposed to teach overseas over summer. Those have all been canceled. And now we're just waiting to see what fall's going to look like. Are we actually going to have school the same way that we did in the past? It's a really weird time.
Yeah, for sure. Now, what are you doing then to pass the time now that you're not teaching all these classes?
That's a great question. Well, I am teaching still online on Zoom, like most of us, but I also I've started baking bread. I've started, like most people, I've seen flowers sold out at the stores. I've also been, trying to help out if anyone needs anything to sort of, deliver it to them if they ask for anything that they might need. Try to connect a lot more with the community. I'm also helping with a grab and go service where they're having milk delivery here in town from a local creamery. That's been a pretty nice experience too. So just trying to keep connected with the community as much as possible with that social distancing and keeping positive.
Absolutely. That's awesome that you're helping out like that. Now, would you have any suggestion, tips, fun ideas for those like myself who are now stuck in their apartment by themselves for the foreseeable future?
I think that what we can do is, build as much solidarity as possible with people. I was just reading the New Yorker today on the patio, and there's a really interesting website that is called Quarantine Chat, quarantinechat.com. And the nice thing about that is it's a way for people to connect with one another in ways that you would, say, for example, if you're in a bar or you're at the grocery store, and it actually connects you randomly on a phone call and you talk about something. And
That's awesome.
It's kind of like the random conversations that you would have in person, but at home. And I think that that's a great thing too, aside from picking up new hobbies or a new language or whatever else, that would be something I'd recommend.
Awesome. That's a great tip. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Claire Marie. Stay safe.
Thank you so much.
Joining us now is an individual who, in the past year or so, has really become a significant presence in the Franco-American world. Calvin Fox is a student on Concordia University, and he has started the Francophone RI project to help preserve Woonsocket's French-Canadian heritage. Calvin, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. It's amazing. It's really exciting to be here.
Now, where are you coming from right now?
Actually, I'm coming from my home right now in Rhode Island. I was lucky enough to make it back, before all the craziness started happening. But yeah, I'm coming home from Rhode Island.
Now, obviously, I should note that you're normally up in Montreal. That's where you would normally be. Now, were you guys tossed out of all housing there? Is that what happened?
No, so as soon as the schools kind of started getting wind of what was going on, they started cutting the classes. So we kind of just decided, and it was more of a lucky choice to just go home before it got too crazy.
Sure.
And we kind of just decided to do that because some of our classes were online anyway. So we were like, just to be safe. And then it ended up happening that they closed the borders and all that stuff. So we kind of just got lucky.
Have they moved all your classes to like online classes now?
Yeah, all my classes are online now, and they don't open up back to like physical school until the end of April, I believe. So
we hope.
Yeah.
Now I got you. So what does Rhode Island look like now?
It's not too bad. I mean, when you go food shopping, the stores are definitely a lot less stocked than usual. And some people are going pretty heavy on the food, but I would say for the most part, people are in a weird way pretty calm. It's actually pretty nice to see a lot of people with their families, and it's almost like a calmer environment than usual in terms of people being together and that stuff. But yeah.
No, I got you. And what does your day look like now? Now that you're not, you're a college athlete. I should mention that as well. So you are a college athlete. You are a college student who would be going to class, be training. Now, what the heck are you doing with your time?
Well, it's definitely interesting having like this much free time. Our trainers on the athletic side send us a new like inside workout program to do every day. Every morning we'll get an email, and we end up having to do the program that she sends. And then on the academic side, we still have to do classes. We still have to do everything as normal. But yeah, and then besides that, I've just trying to been working on the page a little bit, coming up with more ideas for Francophone Rhode Island, trying to, put the best things out there I can in the future and all that good stuff. So.
And one thing I will note, we got to plug for sure, is you have merchandise. So what do you have, and where can people get it?
So right now we're in the process of, launching, a merchandise store. It's on Teespring. And if you just type in Francophone Rhode Island, it'll come up, and you'll see, we have different T-shirts. We have some coffee mugs, and that's it for right now. We're looking to expand more and more. I just want to make sure that I don't just put out crap work. I want to really try to create something that kind of has a meaning, and something that, if someone's going to buy it, I want them to actually have, feel like there's meaning behind it, and that actually represents something that I'm just trying to, get money or whatever, So I'm trying to be very specific and meaningful with each shirt that I do.
Well, the work you are doing is absolutely awesome. So, Cal, thank you so much for joining us, sir.
No problem. It was a pleasure. It was really exciting.
Joining us now is Juliana L'Heureux. So, Juliana was actually the very first person we ever interviewed for the program. And that interview became our number 2 show that we released. Now, Juliana joined us again for our Christmas episode. She also is behind the really good blog, Franco-American News and Culture. Juliana, welcome back to the podcast.
Well, it's good to be with you, and I hope you and all of your families and your colleagues there are safe and well. Is everything okay?
So far, yeah. We're kind of all keeping separate, doing our thing. So what does your life look like now then?
Well, you know, I'm so fortunate in terms of the Franco-American connection, because I have terrific colleagues like you and your staff, and 30-some years writing about Franco-Americans all over New England. Honestly, with social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, listservs. I have a listserv called Friends, and I'll plug that here. I've had it for years. It's called Friends at mainwriter.com. You know, people have been communicating, and that's really what's important right now, that we're connecting with people who we know and we've followed for years, and hearing from them, and just, you know, reaffirming that everybody's okay. So it's really been good that way. My husband and I certainly are self-sheltering here in Maine. We are in high-risk groups based on our age, but actually we're pretty healthy, and we feel very blessed about that. So what I'm doing is writing about it. The past couple of blogs that I put up really reflected on the Franco-American experience in challenging times. And I think one of the most interesting blogs that I have revisited over the years has been about Tante Blanche up in Madawaska. And she is a heroine of that region. And in 1797, she sort of saved her population in that area of the world, which was not a state then, called Madawaska Territory, Madawaska Region, 1797. She saved her community from starvation during the Black Famine of that period. And that story is not a myth. It's been well documented over the years, and she's buried in a church cemetery in New Brunswick, and she's a very real heroine of the Franco-American, the Acadian culture. So I've been writing about, you know, the challenges that we've had in the past, and people have overcome them. So that's kind of what I've been doing, just reconnecting with everyone who has helped me over the years to develop the stories I've written about and spoken about on your podcast, and to communicate that back, you know, to the world. I also, though, I want to digress here and just tell you something, and I hope he's going to be listening. You have a real fan, and I want to do a shout-out to Charlie Remy. Charlie is a electronic services librarian at the University of Tennessee in the Chattanooga, University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. He's a native of Gorham, Maine, and his father is a Franco-American, George Remy, and he follows your blog and loves it. So I want to give a shout-out to Remy down in Tennessee.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Send us an email.
Yeah,
send us an email. We'll connect. Now, one other thing, I guess I just wanted to get your thoughts on. What advice, if any, do you have any hints, suggestions for someone like myself who is going to be stuck in an apartment for the foreseeable future?
Well, that's an easy answer. You have a wonderful family story. I've read about it online, but you need to get it out there and talk about it. You have a story of family faith and challenges, and you should make that public. That would be my advice to you. And make a journal out of it with pictures, references to the history. Who was it who called me today? Oh yes, a gentleman, a priest. He called me from Florida today. Father Raymond Auger. He's a Franco-American, grew up in Biddeford. A lot of people listening to this podcast may know him. But right now he's a retired priest, and he's living in Florida. And he called me today because he's 92, 93. He's old, okay? So
sure.
I said, so Father, what are you doing with the time that you have to stay inside all the time? And he told me that he has traveled all over the world. Actually, he's had sort of a charmed life. He's actually been the chaplain on a lot of these cruise ships that are now, of course, stranded at sea, but kept journals of all his travels with pictures. And he's putting them all together in like a big diary. And that's what he's been doing. He's been scanning the pictures, labeling the pictures. He's been putting the pictures with his journal entries, which are all dated. He dated every single time he wrote, he would date it. He's putting that together in like a big volume. And he said, so Julie, he says, what should I do with this when it's all finished? And I said, Father, you have to donate that to an historical archives. Find an historical archives, even the Diocese of Portland, because you used to be a priest here before you moved to Florida. But there are others, even in Manchester and in the University of Southern Maine and St. Anselm's, and donate that. And he had never thought to do that, and he is thinking about doing that. So he's taking that advice. And so I would say the same to all Franco-Americans. One of the things I'm really concerned about, and it really bothers me a lot, is because of the closure of the border now. Now you can't cross the Canadian-U.S. border unless you have a vital reason to do so. And I fear, and I sincerely mean this, I fear that getting back to any kind of normal on that cross-border communication is not going to be seen again in our lifetime. This is a tremendous tragedy. And so I'm afraid we're going to lose that connectedness. That's what I'm afraid of. But we can overcome that if we continue to document our family stories and communicate that over the social media so that we can continue to connect with those family people who we may never really have another family reunion with. We don't know, but I'm not going to predict that we won't, but I don't think it's in the immediate future for sure. So that's what I would suggest that everyone do, is write your families and memoirs. And don't think that anything that you can remember is not important, because everything that you can remember is important. So I would encourage that everyone write that story down and to submit it to a local or state historical society. So that would be my advice.
I like it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, you guys stay safe, okay?
Joining us now is a guest that has already been on the podcast a couple of times already. In episode 6, we spoke with James Myall about his work, including his must-read blog, Parlez-vous American. James also joined us a couple of episodes later to educate us on Saint Jean-Baptiste celebrations in New England. James, welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, sure. Thanks for having me, Jesse.
Now, what does your new normal look like?
I think like a lot of us, I'm trying to balance working at home and minding my kids and doing all the other stuff that sort of we all try and do in our regular lives as well. So it's all been smushed together very quickly.
Now, did you quickly turn into a homeschool teacher? Is that your life? Hearing that
a little bit. My 2 older girls are actually with my mother-in-law, who's a retired teacher, so she's doing a little bit of homeschooling, which is nice. But I've got a 2 almost 3-year-old who I'm doing some very basic things with.
Oh man, good luck with that.
Mm-hmm.
So now, how's this impacting your Franco-American work at all?
Yeah, it's weird. I had thought initially it would give me a whole bunch of extra time to do reading and some writing, and at least for the last couple of chaotic weeks, it's been a lot less time. So maybe when some of that settles out, I'll have a little backlog of ideas that I'll have been working on. But so far, it's been a little chaotic to do anything with.
No, I got it. A lot of uncertainty, too, which I think drives everybody kind of crazy. All right, so I'll get you out of here on this. Do you have any suggestions or hints for someone like myself who is stuck in the apartment for the foreseeable future?
I do think if there are folks who I struggle because I don't have a lot of time on my hands right now, but I think if there are folks who have extra time on their hands, I do think it's a great time to maybe look through some of that the family history stuff, or read the book you've been meaning to pick up again for a long time. So potentially there's a lot of opportunity for learning for all of us.
Awesome. I appreciate it, James. Thank you, sir.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Jesse.
Yeah, have a good one. Our next guest, Rémi Francoeur, grew up on the west side of my hometown, Manchester, New Hampshire, but he is now a public relations and communications consultant in Montreal, and he's working on a book project that a whole lot of us are pretty excited about, titled The Last Franco-American. Rémi, thank you for joining us, sir.
Thanks. It's a pleasure.
Now, what does life look like in Montreal now?
Well, right now, same as everywhere, in isolation, confinement, and been like this for 3 weeks now. We're a little ahead of New Hampshire and New England in terms of the restrictions things like that. But other than that, life's been pretty good considering.
Gotcha. So what does this kind of thing have as far as an impact on somebody who works as a public relations consultant? I would imagine it's got to be pretty significant.
Oh, yeah. Crisis management, especially right now, government's got to deal with basically different measures every day. Public relations, have to be versatile and basically expect the unexpected every day.
Do you have any fun suggestions for someone like myself who is now stuck in an apartment for the foreseeable future?
Suggestions for we've used applications like Zoom, and I've just learned of this application. I think it's called House Party Trivia Game, but yeah, Zoom's been working great.
I like that. Very cool.
Other than that, it's basically been a lot of screen time. Netflix. I'm not a big video gamer, so.
No, I get that.
And walks and while keeping 6 feet away minimum with from other people.
that seems to be kind of the challenge at this point. For
Yeah.
Sure. Now, I'll get you out on here on this. I'll let you plug it a little bit because I think it's awesome. Tell us about the last Franco-American project. Where's that up to?
So I started it. There's a bit of irony in here because, to give a little background, when I arrived in Montreal, the first few months to a year or even more, but especially when I arrived, I kept on getting a surprised reaction by, like, oh my God, you're American and you speak French with a Quebec accent with old expressions like we used to use, like they'd say like my parents or grandparents used to say, because basically that's where our French comes from in Manchester. So it was the first time where I realized that people held a large interest. I didn't realize it. I was really just a rare, I guess I'll say a rare deal, because there's not a lot of people under the age of, I'll say 50 even, or say even 60 that are fluent in French in New England or still speak it mostly with their families. So the people up here didn't think that it still existed south of the border, minus like in Louisiana or northern Maine, because there's the exceptions that people always know about.
Sure.
And so I realized more and more so we'd get into like large conversations about myself, like holiday parties, like our traditions, about how they were much more so, we'll say French Canadian or Quebecois than American, and just the way we just our ways of living. We're I don't know. I think we were a lot less cold than most Englanders too, growing up. So I think inside of me is like a sharp divide between the American New Englander and the we'll say growing up in a very French Canadian Quebecois culture. So I realized about a year after I moved to Montreal, like, I have a lot of substance to write a book about for people directed at two audiences, the one north of the border and the one south of the border, because they don't really realize how connected they are. And so I wrote it in French, and it took me about a year and a half, if not more, maybe 2 years.
That's awesome.
And then I sent it to a few people, and I didn't really get much feedback. And after rereading it, realized, all right, this is really dry. There's a bunch of like sentence structure issues, a lot of that, because I mean, my only education in French was started in 7th grade with the option of 45 minutes a day, which doesn't give you much. I made a connection between what I had for oral and speaking and listening, whatever, to reading and writing. So I made a big decision between I have to give it more juice, so I have to rewrite it in English while translating it, but rewriting it in a what I like to read type of way. So that took me, I just finished about a month ago. So it took me about 13 to 14 months.
That's awesome.
So I have three readers in New England, first generation American, Franco-Americans. They can speak a little French, so they can really, and they're actually both like myself, like first generation college students. A lot of us, our parents, worked in the mills.
Yeah.
and moved on to construction, like union construction, a lot of our parents and aunts and uncles. So they can identify with a lot of this.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, sir. Stay safe.
Thank you. You too. Stay healthy.
Joining us now is Rhea Robbins, who will be a guest on an upcoming episode of the podcast. She is the author of Down the Plains and Wednesday's Child, and she is the founder and executive director of the Franco-American Women's Institute. Rhea, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Now, what does your normal currently look like?
I haven't changed all that much, really, other than, not so many trips to the store because I was retired. So I was already working at home.
Now, does this had any impact on the organizations that you work with?
Well, I was scheduled to do a presentation with Mount Desert Island, some training with teachers. There was they were looking at the cultures, Franco-American, Native American, and I think Hispanic, through the arts. And so I was going down to do a presentation, so that got canceled. And then also a panel for the Franco-American Center. But what's happened with that is we're going virtual. So nice. On the 3rd, April 3rd at 10 o'clock, I'll be doing a virtual presentation on Zoom.
Nice.
For suffrage and Maine women legislators.
Now, is that open to the public?
It is, yes. I can send you the link. Lisa Michaud has set that up at the Franco-American Center.
Very cool. Now, is that first event that you mentioned, is that going to be rescheduled? Do we know?
They might, but right now what's happening with us in the schools in Maine is that Bangor is completely canceled for the rest of the year. So once Bangor makes a decision, I think everybody will be following. So that probably will be something that will happen maybe later in the future. But there were a bunch of people that were from the Franco culture that were going down. So that was really kind of a fun thing because they were going at it by the arts.
Hopefully that can still happen.
Yeah.
For sure.
Right.
Now, what kind of suggestions would you have for someone like myself who now finds themselves inside for the foreseeable future?
I think that everybody will probably go at this, different way. I think that, some of the things that I'm seeing is, people doing their work or their exercising or the artwork or whatever, the reading. But I guess part of it is, for me, is setting a goal or 2 or 3 goals for each day.
I like
if
that.
You're at home and, go from there and see what happens, because I think that's what I do. I set a goal or many goals, depending.
Sure. Well, I appreciate. I think that's a good approach.
Because that's what I did to my grandson, because he's a senior this year. So the thing is, if his school is canceled, maybe no graduation, maybe no senior prom, right?
Oh, that's terrible.
Oh, that would be hard. But anyway, so I called him up and I'm saying, well, what's your goal for today? So he knows now when I call him, I'm going to say, what's your goal?
I like that.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Rhea, thank you for joining us. That's awesome.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Stay safe.
Yes, you do the same. Our guest, Patrick Lacroix, was someone we talked with way back in episode 5, and he's somebody we will connect with again on a future episode. He also kicked off our Why Do You Tell the Franco-American Story series. Now, Patrick is a leading scholar of Franco-American history, and he runs the outstanding blog Query the Past, and he's currently an instructor at Mount St. Vincent University and at Acadia University in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Patrick, thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you, Jesse. Always a pleasure.
Now, what does Halifax look like now?
Luckily, I've steered away from the big city. There have been a few clusters of this dreaded COVID in the province, and luckily, we're kind of, I don't want to overestimate how well we're doing here,
Sure.
But the cases in the Atlantic region have been a lot fewer than in other parts of Canada or New England even. So luckily, I'm kind of out in the boondocks in Wolfville and trying to steer away from all the crowds and, going out for a little bit of fresh air and staying active, but that's the extent of it.
Now, what has been the response from the universities that you work with?
Yeah, so a few weeks ago, I think it's almost exactly 2 weeks now, both institutions I work at decided to cancel all in-person classes. So those courses are still going on, but they're going on in all digital. For somebody as technologically unsavvy as I am, it's been, I mean, you've seen my phone.
Yeah, I have indeed.
Which is the stuff of legend at this point.
Yes, for sure.
So I've been adjusting as best as I can. And, luckily we only had a few weeks to go to the term. We're kind of wrapping up right now, partly because we start so early in January. So we were really close to the end. I really thought for a second that we were going to make it with in-person classes, but that's not happening. So right now I'm mostly focusing on making sure that my students have all the digital resources they can use for their final papers, and their essay is going to be a take-home, and they'll have plenty of time to work on that. And some of my students for one of these institutions have the option of, instead of taking an actual numerical grade, of taking a pass-fail, which doesn't affect their GPA. So at least in that sense, we're trying to minimize the disruptive effect, especially since a lot of these students, are also dealing with really stressful situations in terms of health, jobs, all sorts of other things that honestly are more important than, a single grade in a single class. So I'm trying to be as accommodating as I can be.
Do either of your universities offer summer classes or trips abroad? And what is happening with all of that?
I assumed there were trips that I was entirely not involved with that were going to take place. I wasn't volunteered, or I didn't volunteer myself, of course. So my assumption, of course, is that those are canceled. So that's somewhat of a tricky situation. As for the spring and summer classes, I think the plan is still to go forward with them and to just really quickly and try to make it work online. Many of the courses that are typically offered during those two terms, spring and summer, are actually already online because people know that students have summer jobs and have other concerns during those months. So I think that ultimately the disruptive effect of those classes will be somewhat lessened, especially since a lot of us now have some experience teaching online. So that's kind of the virtue of transitioning in the course of this term.
I got you. All right, I'll get you out of here on this. What suggestions do you have for someone like myself who has been in this apartment for quite some time and doesn't foresee leaving it in anytime soon?
Well, one of the great joys of the last few weeks for me, as I am, cooped up as well, maybe not to the same extent, I have this wonderful bird feeder right outside my kitchen window, and it's just been absolute chaos. I fill it up every other day, and the birds, I could, even in the age of Netflix, even in the age of YouTube and everything else, I think that's as entertaining as anything else I've seen. So if you can have somebody put out a bird feeder close to a window or something, you'll see that it turns into a circus, and I love it. So that's been, a really low energy, low cost way of keeping myself busy. But of course the web is great, and it's been wonderful to see so many fellow researchers and scholars post a lot of great stuff. I'm reading more than I have in the last few months, so that's great. Also trying to stay active, but I find if I don't go out, it doesn't really happen. So hopefully you can get better tips from somebody else. I'm not being very helpful here, but I'm trying.
I like it. No, I appreciate it. Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate it, sir.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
Joining us now is someone we've heard a couple of different times on the podcast, my sister, Monique. Monique, welcome back.
Jesse, how you doing?
I'm good. Now, what does your life look like now?
Looks like me trying to entertain a 15-month-old every day.
The two of you hanging out?
Yeah, the two of us just hanging out and trying to keep him amused, trying not to go insane, just because it's a lot to take care of a 15-month-old all the time. God bless those daycare teachers, those early childhood teachers, because typically he goes to daycare, but his daycare's closed. Keeping him entertained, keeping him busy. We try to go outside maybe once a day, but staying inside. And
yeah, now that's one thing that's interesting, because I know in New Hampshire anyway, I still have friends who are able to send their kids to daycare. Are all the daycares in Maine closed?
No, it's actually up to...
It's like a town by town thing?
It's not even a town by town thing. It's a director by director thing.
Gotcha.
So his director, which I mean, again, everybody, and I do understand I own a business, so I understand the flip side of that. But his director for the safety of the kids and the families thought it was the best move to follow the school district.
Oh, I agree. And we hear all the time about the impact this might have on a business. And I did want to you are a business owner. What does this mean for you and your studio? I should know you own a studio.
Yeah, so I own a dance studio, and we're closed for who knows how long. As of right now, we're following the Sanford, Maine School District, because that's where I'm located, which is supposed to open up again on my birthday, April 27th. Don't forget. But so in like a month, it's supposed to open up again. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure when that's going to happen. We're supposed to have, today, we were supposed to be at a competition down in Nashua, New Hampshire. That's been canceled. I'm supposed to have a recital at the end of May. Again, I don't know how that's going to look with only us coming back, if we even come back at the end of April.
Right.
So there's a lot of factors. The other factor, obviously, is even though I am not open, I still have bills at the studio. So, I'm going to be feeling the impact of that to try to keep, I'm at the minimum paying my electricity, my internet, my rent, while we're closed and I'm not bringing anything in. Because that's the way I look at it. I don't think it's fair for me to charge when I'm not actually offering the service.
Of course.
It just means I got to swallow that a little bit. So.
No, of course. And last question, what would you suggest to someone like myself who is now stuck inside for the foreseeable future? Any fun tips? Any fun suggestions?
Lose to your sister at Ticket to Ride.
Online app board games.
Board games. Yep. So I think we're actually tied 1-1 right now. Actually, but I took the family one, so really I'm up. But just putting it out there. But I think that's something I would say. Try to connect to people as much as possible. I try to FaceTime. Like I FaceTime my parents, I FaceTime my brother as much as possible. We've tried to FaceTime, other relatives and friends and stuff, especially because my little guy is so young, and I don't want him to not see people for months, which is what we're looking at right now. So just trying to stay connected to people as best you can. And then I think that's it. I mean, I think everybody is different. I think I need to work on myself, getting a better schedule, getting a more set schedule, because this is going to go on for a little bit. So kind of in two things, embrace the suck and hunt the good stuff,
There you go. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for the time. Monique, stay safe.
Out.
Now our fathers look at us and sigh with despair, to think that everything they love we simply do not share. But the spirit never dies, our culture will survive. Each of us must choose how much to keep alive. Each of us must choose how much to keep alive.
Special thanks to Josie Vachon for providing the music. You can find more about her at josievachon.com. This podcast was produced and edited by Mike Campbell. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at fclpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at FCL Podcast for more information about the topics discussed. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this episode.